What's going on, everyone? It's your boy DT back with a new segment that I want to try to do as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season in both college and NFL. Is a little bit of a weekly or bi-weekly segment called Draft Talk with DT. Really just want to come on and give my thoughts about a specific topic or a specific position, as in the case of this episode tonight, and really just ramp up the draft talk on my channel. I know obviously it's a Jets channel, but we're also a draft channel, right? Because we know that the season ends before October and we have to be scouting these guys for the future of this team. So I put out a tweet yesterday morning basically breaking down my top five, my very early top five quarterback rankings. And I'm not going to obviously share the tweet up front here, but it got a lot of pushback, a lot of debate, a lot of conversation going in the replies. So I wanted to come on and give a longer form, kind of detailed explanation and analysis of why I chose those guys as my top five quarterbacks. There's going to be an honorable mention in here, but we'll start from the bottom up and we'll go from technically 6 to 1 on the rankings. And I do have a slideshow to help organize my thoughts for everybody viewing on YouTube. If you're just listening, that's fine. I will talk through it all, of course. Starting with my honorable mention, this would technically, I guess, be quarterback 6. He's in the mix with a lot of other names. I think Lunaris Sellers is still in this mix. Garrett Nussmeier to a degree, Drew Aller to a degree, all could fit in this honorable mention bucket. But I want to specifically talk about Darian Mensah, somebody who's relatively new on my radar. I had everybody's favorite Jets draft analyst, Dom C, on the channel about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he discussed Darian Mensah in high regard. And I thought, okay, knowledge of this player, I need to figure out what Darian Mensah is for myself. And I come away very impressed, but I don't think I'm as high on Darian Mensah as Dom C. However, he is only in his year 20 season. So with all of the skepticism about, is a player going to return to school? Is he going to, declare for the NFL draft? That's not really what this specific episode is about. It's more just the player in their current stage. So being only 20 years old, I think Darian Mensah has a ton of room for growth. So he is the Duke Blue Devil quarterback. As you see, 6'3", 205 are his estimated measurables. He is a 3-star recruit and a 2-year starter, 1 year at Tulane in 2024, and then he transferred to Duke in 2025. His passing stats this season, 67.4% completion percentage, 3,182 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. His passing yards and his passing touchdowns both lead the conference. They both lead the ACC. So a ton of upside already with Darian Mensah, and the production pops off the screen to you. My biggest strengths that I saw on his film in the few games, 2 or 3 games that I watched of him: off-platform throws. Duke loves to get him outside the pocket, throwing on the run. He does a really good job of throwing off platform. I think he keeps his upper half and his bottom half in line, and he doesn't really get over his toes, and he's not over too much to the side when he's throwing either. He stays pretty vertical. So he does a good job of the off platform throws. When he is in the pocket, I think his footwork and timing is really advanced. On quick game passing concepts, I feel like he can speed up his drop back to get to the back of his drop at the time of the routes breaking open for him in the concept. So I think he does a really good job with the timing and the footwork inside the pocket as well. And then his release mechanics, I think he can do the 3/4, the arm angle stuff, the slotted stuff, and really, lower his arm angle and throw it, pseudo like a baseball player, like an infielder in baseball. But I think when he does the over-the-top release, he still has, a good quick release. It's not too slow and predictable. So I really think his release mechanics are a plus so far through his career. The 2 areas I think he needs the most work on, and we talked about this in the film breakdown, which I'll link the playlist to all the film breakdowns below in the description so you can check out any quarterback we talked about today. His accuracy, I think it just needs a little bit more consistency, short, intermediate, deep passing. I think he has flashes of really good accuracy at times, but then there's times where it's like not necessarily a lazy throw, but a throw that you've seen him make before and you wonder why isn't he making that more consistently. So a little bit more time on task perhaps can get that accuracy up for him. But the biggest, I guess, red flag or area that needs improvement is his scramble awareness. There were two instances in the games that I watched of Mensa where he broke the pocket out of the B gap. The rusher turned back up their arc and hit him from behind where he was completely clueless, and he fumbled the ball both times, losing the fumble in that game. So I want to see him when he breaks the pocket, just have a little bit more feel for the defenders around him, because just because he breaks out of the pocket doesn't mean somebody isn't chasing him down from behind. So in the NFL, that's only going to get, magnified, and everybody's going to be barreling down on you when you escape the pocket. So I want to see him have a little bit more awareness. Obviously, I don't anticipate him growing eyes in the back of his head, but I do think when you're a quarterback, you got to have a better feel for the pocket. Even when you break the pocket, you have to have good feel when you leave it. So that's my 2 cents on Mensa. He is my honorable mention, quarterback 6. Quarterback 5, this is the quarterback that I probably have the least amount of exposure on, full transparency. That is Jaden Mayava from USC. He is a junior. He is 6'4", 230 pounds, so a little bit bigger in stature. He's got a couple more pounds than Mensa, extra inch or two. 3-star recruit, 2-year starter from UNLV, transferred to USC. His 2025 stats, 65.7% completions, 3,174 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. His passing yards, 3,174, leads the Big Ten. So again, another, productive passer, just like Mensa. Again, the least amount of exposure on him. I saw the Iowa game, all 22. I felt like he was a good manager of that game. He didn't do a ton to, put the game in jeopardy, but he also didn't do a ton to, put his team on his back, so to speak. So the Iowa game was solid for him. And then I saw the Oregon game, his most recent game. Still waiting for the all 22 on that one. But I think in those 2 games, I saw enough of a sample size to have him at 5. Right. And I think this is out of a 10 quarterback pool. So really more than half of the guys are getting ranked in this exercise. And I feel like with Jaden Mayava, the arm talent mixed with the arm strength is certainly evident with him. And I think once you put together some of the negatives with him, you can really see how these strengths are going to be, excelled at the next level, right? His arm talent, he can make all the throws on the field. The arm strength, I've seen him uncork a couple passes. Some weren't caught, some were a little off target, but he certainly has the ability to wind up and throw one super deep. And I do like his mobility. He is definitely a dual threat. He has 6 rushing touchdowns on the year, so he's definitely a viable option when you get down into that red zone area. Obviously, he has, a ton of weapons with Jacoby Lane, and Mekhi Lemon at wide receiver. So he doesn't necessarily need to run a lot, but when he can, he will, and he is pretty effective. So accuracy, medium and deep, I think that's definitely a work in progress with him, and that was on display against Oregon. I thought he was missing a couple passes, or he was getting a little bit bailed out by such good wide receiver play. But again, if you have really good wide receivers, you're going to throw it to an area and expect them to make a play. So it's a bit of a hand-in-hand situation there, but accuracy needs a little bit more refinement. And then his drop-back footwork, I think he gets a little, I don't want to say Sam Darnold just because he's wearing a USC number 14, but there are certainly some elements of that happy feet footwork, and that's going to take a little bit off, right? If you aren't throwing from a good base or you're throwing off a wonky platform, you're going to lose, 5 to 7 yards of air yards on your pass. So I think if he can put together the drop back footwork on a consistent basis, that will allow the accuracy to in turn get better, but that'll also, showcase his arm strength and his arm talent way more than he's already displaying. So definitely a lot to like with Mayava, but I have him at 5. One, due to limited exposure, and two, I just think there's a little bit too much work left compared to the other four guys. My quarterback number 4, John Mateer. He is the redshirt junior from Oklahoma. 6'1", 224 pounds, 3-star recruit, 2-year starter, transfer from Washington State. He has 1.5 years of starting experience at Washington State, and then he transfers over to Oklahoma this year. On the season, 62.3% completions, 2,260 passing yards with an additional 389 on the ground, 10 passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and 7 touchdowns on the ground. So I put his rushing stats in here because I think that is part of his game. He is certainly a dual threat quarterback. He runs the quarterback, the designed runs, the quarterback draws, the powers, the sweeps, counters. He does all those things in Oklahoma's offense. So I did think it was important to include that he has nearly 400 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. You look at his passing stats, and they're not that special. Obviously, he had the right thumb injury that required surgery midseason, and I believe it was within 18 to 21 days he was back out on the field playing against Texas in the Red River rivalry. I didn't necessarily think that he should have played in that game just based on watching the game live and the eye test of his hand not really reacting the way that it should, being that it is his throwing hand and his thumb nonetheless. So he definitely pushed to come back a little sooner, but right now Oklahoma is absolutely rolling, and it's not necessarily because of John Mateer, but they're not winning in spite of John Mateer. So I do think a lot of the things that he does schematically for Oklahoma are translatable to the NFL, right? We talked about the quarterback designed run game. I do think he throws with a good amount of anticipation. That's one of his strengths, in my opinion, is his anticipatory throws. Obviously, his toughness is another one alluded by the thumb injury and coming back early. He likes to put his head down and get a couple extra yards, which, as we see with Jackson Dart in the NFL this year with the Giants, maybe it's not necessarily the most translatable trait, but you like having toughness at the quarterback position. He kind of gives you, again, kind of a lazy comparison, but a Baker Mayfield vibe where he's just a gamer and he plays through the whistle, and he's always going to, do the most to elevate his teammates. So his toughness, his mobility, and the designed runs and his anticipatory throws are certainly my favorite attributes with John Mateer. The things that I would like to see him work on: his ball placement. When he does throw with anticipation, it's not always in a spot where his receiver can just immediately turn around, react, and find it, go get it. You want to see a little bit better consistency in ball placement across the board for him. And then decision-making, right? You have a 10-7 touchdown to interception ratio, and I don't want to excuse a couple of his interceptions on his thumb injury, but you have to factor that in a little bit into the equation. So I want to see the decision-making get a little bit better. I saw him stare down a couple routes where he would stare down like a slant route. It was behind, and all of a sudden it's turned into an interception. So I definitely want to see a little bit more quarterback smarts, or IQ, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Football IQ in certain situations. Don't always throw up that turnover-worthy play and live to see another down. So quarterback 4 is John Mateer for me. Quarterback 3, and now I should say that this is the first time that we have a bit of a tier break, actually quite a bit of a tier break. I think the gap between Maava and John Mateer is quite large between Ty Simpson and those two there. So my gap from even 6 with Mensa, 6, 5, and 4, there's going to be a large gap going up to number 3 now, and that's going to be Ty Simpson, the junior from Alabama, 6'2", 208 pounds, 5-star recruit, but a 1-year starter, just 11 games this year for the Crimson Tide. 66.9% completion percentage, 2,934 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Kind of all over the place with evals right now for Ty Simpson, not just myself personally, but when you look at the total landscape of the draft community, Ty Simpson with his 11 games has looked really good at times, and then he's had stinkers, including his most recent game against East Illinois, where they won 56-0, and he had 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Granted, Alabama was able to run the ball for over 250 yards as a team. You definitely want to see him be able to get his in one of those types of matchups. So definitely not the best day for him. And it feels like ever since the Oklahoma game, it's been a little bit of a slide for Ty Simpson in terms of his production. I do love his arm strength. He was able to uncork a 60-plus yard air yard pass in one of the games that I've watched on film of him. So I thought that was really special. I think that was the South Carolina game. He's got a ton of poise in the pocket. He's going to stand there and take the hit. He's not afraid of it. And he understands where he wants to go with the ball. And he's just very cool and calm in the pocket. He doesn't, flinch when pressure's coming. Sometimes he has to throw, a little bit fading away, but he really stands in there and takes the hits. And then another strength of his is his escapability. He doesn't necessarily wow you with his mobility. As you can kind of see in the picture I used of him, he's really trying his hardest on this run, but he has enough of good feet to get out of the situation, out of the pocket. Now, does that mean he's going to break an explosive run down the field? Not necessarily, but it can happen. I just think his ability to step up and step out of like the B gap or step up through the A gap and try to keep his eyes downfield and make a pass is really exceptional from Ty Simpson. So you see a lot of good improv plays from him as well doing that. So I wanted to highlight his escapability, even if his mobility is not necessarily, all world. The two areas of weakness for him, deep accuracy. I alluded to this in my film breakdown of him. He missed a lot of deep throws against really good competition. I watched him against South Carolina and Oklahoma, so some of the better defenses that he's faced this season. But I do think his deep ball accuracy needs to get worked on. He can uncork a pass, but it's not always in the right spot. So definitely something that needs to be cleaned up. And then really the only other negative with him is time on task. I would just like to see a larger sample size. That doesn't mean that I would exclude him from my draft board if I was an NFL team, but I do think that over these 11 games, we've learned quite a bit about Ty Simpson, the player, but I feel like the rest of this season, I don't remember if Alabama's in contention for the playoff. I believe they are. But if they make it to the playoff and he's able to put together a really good, late December into January, then that'll go a long way for his, draft eval right at the end of the season when he sits down with his agents and the board that gives him his, preliminary grade of, okay, you're going to be a late first round pick. Okay, maybe you're an early second round pick. Do you want to go back to school if you're only going to be a fringe top 40 pick? Maybe that's the case. But if he has a really good, winter and a good draft process and he comes out of the regular season and the playoffs and they say, you're probably looking at a top 20 pick at worst, then yeah, Ty Simpson's probably going to come out because the desperation of teams to get a quarterback means that if he's in the top 20, he's probably going to go in the top 10, maybe even the top 5 to 8, just due to, team needs and desperation. So time on task is certainly important for Ty Simpson's eval, and I want to see what the rest of the season holds for him and the Crimson Tide as they continue their season. My number 2 quarterback, Dante Moore, the redshirt sophomore from Oregon, 6'3", 210 pounds, 5-star recruit, only a 1-year starter. Again, 11 games started. And I forgot to mention this with Ty Simpson, and it's important with Dante Moore as well. They sat and waited their turn at their schools. So Ty Simpson sat behind Jalen Milroe for 2 years. Dante Moore sat behind Dylan Gabriel last year at Oregon. So just a 1-year starter for Dante Moore, 72.9% completion percentage, the highest of any of the quarterbacks we'll talk about today. 2,447 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He immediately, when I watched him on tape, became one of my favorite just throwers of the football. And I know that might sound like a lazy term in terms of scouting or evaluating players, but watching the ball fly off his arm and shoulder is just so effortless, so smooth, so fun to watch. I think he has a ton of arm talent. My number 1 strength of his mechanics and release. Like I said, the ball just floats off his hand. It's never really, coming off like a helicopter pass. It's always a tight spiral for the most part, obviously. I love that he has all the arm angles again, like we talked about with a guy like Darian Mensah. He also has all the arm angles, poise, tons of poise in the pocket. He stands there and delivers a pass. Cool, calm, and collected. You don't really see him sweat, right? To use a cliche. And I think he goes toe to toe with just about any competition and exceeds expectations in most games, right? So arm talent, not necessarily arm strength, but arm talent, the way he can just layer a ball over the second level defenders in front of the safeties. He can put that whole shot in between the cloud corner and the deep safety. He does a really good job of that type of stuff. So arm talent, mechanics and release, and poise. My only negative with him, and this is not to, say he's some kind of perfect prospect. There obviously is no perfect prospect, but my only issue with him is time on task, kind of like Ty Simpson. I want to see a larger sample size of him as a starter at the collegiate level. Now, it looks like, I believe, Oregon, with their last win this past weekend, clinched a spot in the college football playoffs. So we'll see them playing through hopefully a long time into December, and Dante Moore can continue building on such a strong season. If he came out in the draft, and there's obviously a lot of speculation of will he declare, won't he declare, just like a lot of these guys, right? He's only a redshirt sophomore. If Dante Moore declares, there is a very good chance that he could even go quarterback 1 on the board. I don't think there is a consensus guy. A lot of people talk about Ty Simpson as quarterback 1. A lot of people talk about Dante Moore as quarterback 1. A lot of people talk about the next guy that I'm about to talk about is their quarterback 1. So right now it's very fluid, and I think the next 6 games between now and the national championship, if any of these quarterbacks go the distance and really build on their resume, these rankings are going to change all across the board, and we'll have to come back and redo the entire top 5 ranking episodes. So Dante Moore for me is number 2. Just want to see a little bit more time on task, but he is a very fun prospect to watch. That leaves my number 1. A lot of people's number 1, Fernando Mendoza, redshirt junior out of Indiana. He transferred from Cal. He's a 3-star recruit, 3-year starter, 2 years starting at Cal, transferred over 1 year starting at Indiana. He's 6'3", 210. Oh, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. He's 6'5", 225 pounds. The graphic is incorrect for those watching on YouTube. So 6'5", 225. So by far the tallest passer of the group. 225, I believe, is the second or third heaviest in terms of weight, but the 6'5" stature definitely is the outlier in terms of all the quarterbacks we've talked about tonight. His 2025 stats, 73% completion percentage, 2,641 yards, 30 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and 5 rushing touchdowns. So his 30 touchdowns doesn't just lead the Big Ten, that leads the entire FBS. So he has the most passing touchdowns of any collegiate quarterback at the FBS level, which is a huge accomplishment. Now, a lot of people obviously are going to look at his coach, Curt Cignetti, who is a very good coach. Don't get me wrong. It is definitely a match made in heaven type of marriage between the head coach and the quarterback right now. The coach is elevating the quarterback, and the quarterback is elevating the rest of the roster in Indiana. That defense is also playing really well. So just all in all, Indiana is buzzing right now, and Fernando Mendoza is a huge part of it. His strengths, I don't like to use the word elite when talking about prospects, but Fernando Mendoza might catch the most catchable or throw the most catchable ball I've ever seen of the guys that we're debating in the 2026 class. It's always, I shouldn't say always, but almost always on the upfield shoulder, right where the guy has to get it, right between the numbers. He doesn't have to reach outside his frame. He can catch it, turn and run, make a play after the catch with it. So his ball placement, short, intermediate, deep, I feel like it's just a super special player in terms of ball placement. His processing is, again, I don't want to use the word elite, but it's so high level. of his processing, recognizing pre-snap where his one-on-ones are, what the coverage is from the defense. Is it a man look? Are they getting a blitz off a hot side and he needs to throw quickly? I feel like he does a really good job of processing all of the field pre and post snap, which helps him make the best decisions possible. And his anticipatory throws, it immediately popped off the screen. Even when he was at Cal and he wasn't, the more polished prospect that he is now, he was still throwing anticipatory throws at Cal and making a lot of those lesser talented players at Cal. Not saying Cal is, a bad school by any means, but he was elevating the talent at Cal while still not being a polished quarterback. And now he's a very polished quarterback, still elevating the players around him at Indiana. So I really enjoy watching Fernando Mendoza, and I think it's a very seamless transition for him into the NFL in a lot of ways. I do think he needs to work on his escapability. He does have enough mobility that if he gets out of the pocket cleanly, he can kill you for an 8 to 15-yard gain and really gash you down the field. But the escapability, sometimes I feel like he gets a little bit too statuesque or stuck in the mud in the pocket, and he can't always break out. Now, he is dealing with some offensive line issues. I know in one of the games, I believe it was up to 3 offensive linemen were missing from the game, and he took quite a few sacks. But I do want to see him, if it's not there, at least try to get out of the pocket and run. But sometimes it's hard for him to escape the pocket. So that was really the biggest concern. And it's not on the graphic as well, but the arm strength, I think he could use. He's not going to, gain arm strength by any means unless he just hits the gym, 8 days a week. But arm strength is probably another one. I like his deep ball accuracy, which is way more important in my opinion. Arm strength is definitely secondary to arm accuracy, but I do think the arm strength is slightly lacking. So again, not a perfect prospect by any means. None of these guys are, but I do think that right now Fernando Mendoza, with everything he's put on film at Indiana, is currently my number 1 quarterback. With that, we have the overall rankings here on the final screen. DT's way too early quarterback rankings. Fernando Mendoza, number 1 out of Indiana. Dante Moore from Oregon, number 2. Ty Simpson from Alabama, number 3. John Mateer, Oklahoma, at 4. Jaden Mayava rounding out the top 5 from USC at 5. And then Darian Mensah, our honorable mention, coming in at pseudo 6th place. We're not going to give him an official number yet because the process is not over. We still have tons of quarterbacks still to talk about. Lenora Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller are the 4 quarterbacks that I watched that did not make the list. I'm not going to bother ranking them right now just because I watched those guys very early on in the season, and a lot of things have happened both positively and negatively for those passers, respectively, where I don't want to give them a ranking grade on an incomplete evaluation. So these 6 passers I felt the most knowledge to talk about, and I wanted to give a little bit deeper dive of my analysis and why I ranked them this way. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe if you're new. We're so close to 1,200 subscribers. I think we're about 15 subscribers away. So please hit that subscribe button for me, and I'll catch you next time.